The desert wind hit Clearwater Station like a whip, throwing red dust into every crack of the earth. When the train screeched to a stop, Nathan Reed didn't move. He stood under the station's weathered awning, hat low over his eyes, the sun carving deep lines into his weather-worn face. His shadow stretched long across the platform boards, still as death in the merciless afternoon heat. Around him, the townspeople gathered, their whispers sharp as cactus spines. "That's him, the deserter from Fort Bowie. They say he couldn't stomach killing Indians. Coward, if you ask me." A woman clutched her shawl tighter. "Shouldn't even be allowed in town." Nathan heard every word but gave no indication. 5 years since he'd left the army, and the whispers still followed him like vultures. His hand instinctively touched the scarred tissue beneath his shirt, where a bullet had nearly taken his life. Not from Apache warriors, but from his own men when he refused to fire on women and children at Battle Canyon. The memory flashed before him: screaming, gunfire, the smell of burning sage, children running. His commanding officer, Captain Harlan, red-faced with fury. "That's a direct order, Reed. Fire, damn you!" Nathan's rifle barrel lowering to the ground, then pain exploding in his chest as Sergeant Miller's bullet found him. The train doors opened with a hiss of steam, pulling him back to the present. First came the usual passengers: a businessman in a dusty suit, a young couple, a priest with a worn Bible. Then she stepped down, barefoot, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, dark eyes catching the light like wet obsidian. Her black hair hung loose around hollow cheeks. The crowd stared, murmured. Someone spat on the ground. Nathan walked forward, each step cutting through the noise. The floorboards creaked beneath his worn boots. He reached for the small sack in her hands, his voice low and steady. "Let's go." The woman hesitated, studying him with eyes that had seen too much death. Then she nodded once. As they turned toward the road, a slip of paper was pressed into Nathan's palm. The station master, a thin man with watery eyes, leaned close. "Special delivery from Fort Bowie, Reed," came with her papers. Captain Harlan's handwriting. Nathan would know it anywhere. By the time he read the first line, his jaw had turned to stone, muscles knotting along his neck. "A gift for the coward who couldn't finish the war. See if your mercy survives this one, Reed. She's the last of her clan, the very ones you refused to fire upon." Poetic, isn't it? Perhaps you can tell her how you saved her people, right before they were slaughtered anyway. Nathan crumpled the note in his fist, bile rising in his throat. He glanced at the woman, wondering if she knew she was being delivered to the man who had failed to save her family. Her face revealed nothing, a mask perfected through years of survival. "This way," he said, softer this time. The wagon waited at the end of the street, his old mare flicking her tail against flies. As they walked, storekeepers turned away, mothers pulled children closer. Only old Tom Baker, the blacksmith, offered a silent nod. He'd lost a son in the Apache Wars, but never blamed Nathan for refusing to be a butcher. The road to Whisper Creek stretched empty under a sky bleached white by heat. Dust clung to the wagon wheels, to Nathan's boots, to every thought he tried to bury. He drove in silence, the reins loose in his hands. Beside him, the Apache woman sat straight-backed, eyes fixed on the horizon as if she could be herself somewhere else. San Simon Valley lay still around them, flat land and dying grass, the scent of iron and mesquite drifting through the wind. Heat rippled across the plains, distorting distant mountains. Once, soldiers had marched through these plains under banners that promised peace and left only ashes. Nathan had been one of them. "How far?" Her voice startled him, low and unexpectedly clear. "Hour, maybe less." Nathan kept his eyes on the trail. "Place called Whisper Creek." She made a sound like bitter laughter. "A creek with no water. It runs sometimes, after the rains." She fell silent again, fingers working the frayed edge of her blanket. Nathan stole glances at her profile, high cheekbones, a small scar along her jaw, dignity in the set of her shoulders despite everything. "Why you?" she finally asked as they crossed a dry riverbed. Nathan knew what she meant. Why was she sent to him? He considered lying, then thought better of it. "I served under the man who sent you. He thinks this is punishment for us both." "Punishment," she repeated, testing the word. "For what crime?" Nathan's grip tightened on the reins. Living. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the land. Jackrabbits darted between scrub brush. A hawk circled overhead, patient in its hunting. Nathan felt the weight of the crumpled note in his pocket like a stone. His homestead came into view near sundown. A weathered cabin crouched beside a dry creek bed, a barn leaning slightly to one side. One horse, two fences, half fallen. It wasn't much, but it was the only piece of earth where no one asked who he'd been inside. The small garden he'd managed to coax from the resistant soil lay along the eastern side. A few rows of corn struggling upward, some beans, a patch of squash. The air smelled of wood smoke and loneliness. Nathan helped her down from the wagon, noticing how light she was, bones pressing against skin. Hunger was written in the hollows of her face. He set down her small bag, gesturing to the loft above. "You can stay up there," he said quietly. "I'll sleep down here." She glanced around the sparse cabin, the single bed against the wall, a wooden table with two mismatched chairs, the blackened stone fireplace, a shelf of books, unexpected in this wilderness, a rifle mounted high above the door, dust collected on its barrel. "Don't you want to do what's necessary?" the woman asked, her voice coarse from disuse but her English clear. "You know what I mean?" The question hung between them. Nathan understood its layers, the assumptions about what happened to Apache women taken by white men. His stomach turned. "Get some rest," Nathan answered, then walked away. She didn't move, only studied him with the weary stillness of a cornered animal. The cabin creaked around them, settling with the cooling evening air. "I need to tend to the horse," he said, and escaped outside, lungs filling with the sharp scent of sage and dust. He leaned against the barn wall, breathing hard, fighting memories he'd spent years trying to bury. Battle Canyon. The screaming. His commander's face twisted with rage. The bullet that should have killed him. When he returned to the cabin, she had found the dried meat and was chewing it slowly, methodically, like someone who knew not to rush a meal that might be their last. Her name, he would learn later, was Talise, which meant beautiful water in her language. Now her face was thin from hunger, her hair loose and wind-tangled. A blue bead hung at her throat, the only color left from another life. He poured water from a clay jug, its coolness shocking against his cracked palms. He offered her a cup, which she accepted without touching his fingers. "There's enough food," he said awkwardly. "Eat what you need." She swallowed carefully. "Why am I here?" "I told you, someone's idea of punishment." "No." She set the cup down with precision. "Why am I alive when my family is dead?" The question pierced him like a knife between his ribs. Nathan had asked himself the same thing 1,000 times. Why he lived when others died. He had no answer then. He had none now. Across the room, Talise finally spoke again, her voice from dust. "What did the letter say?" Nathan looked at the folded page on the table, its ink bleeding under sweat and sun. "Nothing that matters," he said after a moment. Then he turned away, though the words inside still burned. "It spoke of me," she said, not a question. "It spoke of cruelty," he corrected. "The man who wrote it, he was my captain. I failed him. Or so he believes." Talisa's eyes narrowed slightly. "You failed to kill." Nathan's head snapped up. She knew. Somehow she knew who he was. "Yes," he admitted. "At Battle Canyon." Her fingers touched the blue bead at her throat. "You were there." The floor seemed to shift beneath his feet. "How do you know that?" "I was there too." Her words fell like stones. "Hidden in the rocks. I saw you lower your gun. I saw you fall." Outside, the cicadas started their evening cry. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the desert wind carried the smell of rain that never came. Inside the cabin, two survivors of the same massacre stared at each other across a chasm of blood and broken promises. Night fell fast over the valley. The desert cooled but did not rest. Crickets rasped, and the wind dragged sand against the cabin walls like a slow whisper. Inside, the single lamp burned low, throwing long shadows across the wooden floor. Nathan sat at the table, hands folded, an untouched plate of beans gone cold. Across the room, Talise crouched near the hearth, coaxing flame from a few reluctant logs. Her movements were quiet but deliberate, the way one handles something that has already hurt them too many times. His mind raced with the revelation. She had been at Battle Canyon, had seen him refuse to fire, seen him shot by his own men. What else had she witnessed? The aftermath when Harlan ordered the village burned anyway? When other soldiers followed orders that Nathan had refused? He watched her for a moment before speaking. You can use the bed if you want. The loft gets hot. She didn't look up. I'll stay near the fire. Her English was halting, shaped by another language, yet every word carried defiance. Silence filled the room again, thick, almost visible. Nathan rose, walked to the door, and looked out at the endless dark. Somewhere out there, coyotes called to one another. He wondered if she heard them differently, if the sound meant home to her. When he turned back, Talise was staring at the letter on the table. You hide words, she said. He froze. It's not for you. Her gaze sharpened. But it speaks of me. Nathan's jaw tightened. He picked up the paper and tucked it into his coat. It's finished. Talisa's lips pressed into a thin line. She turned away, curling the blanket closer around her shoulders. White men always say that, she murmured. Finished. Her tone wasn't bitter, only tired. It hit him harder than any accusation could. He wanted to tell her that he wasn't like the rest, that he hadn't asked for this, that he'd buried his gun years ago. But explanations meant nothing here. He sat back down, the chair creaking under his weight. You have a name? She hesitated, then answered. Talise. He nodded. Nathan Reed. The fire crackled between them. Neither spoke again for a long while, yet the silence felt different, less sharp, more like an uneasy truce. Outside, thunder rolled over the horizon, too far to bring rain. When Nathan finally rose to douse the lamp, he glanced at her one last time. Talisa's eyes were open, fixed on the flicker of dying firelight. There was no fear there anymore, only a watchfulness that matched his own. He lay awake long after, listening to the desert breathe. For the first time in years, the sound didn't make him feel alone. In the darkness before dawn, Nathan woke to the sound of movement. His hand reached for the knife he kept beneath his pillow, a soldier's habit never broken. Then he saw her. Talise, standing over him, a kitchen knife clutched in her hand. Moonlight from the window caught the blade, turned it silver. He didn't move, didn't speak, only looked into her eyes, accepting whatever judgment she had come to deliver. You could have killed me at Battle Canyon, she whispered. You didn't. No. They killed my father anyway. My brothers. Nathan felt the weight of those deaths pressing down on his chest. I know. I should kill you now. Her knuckles whitened around the handle. Maybe you should. Talisa's hand trembled. Why did you say no that day? Nathan closed his eyes, remembering. Because they were people, not targets, not enemies. Just people trying to live. When he opened his eyes again, she was still there, the knife still raised. But something had shifted in her expression. You cried, she said almost accusingly. When they shot you, you cried and spoke to the squaw. He hadn't known anyone had heard his delirious prayers as he bled into the dust. I asked forgiveness. From who? Everyone. No one. He sat up slowly. From people I'd never see again. Talise stood motionless for what felt like hours. Then deliberately, she lowered the knife. I will not kill you tonight, she said. Not forgiveness, just a stay of execution. She returned to her blanket by the cold hearth. Nathan didn't sleep again that night, the phantom pain in his old wound throbbing with each heartbeat. Days stretched long under the desert sun, each one nearly the same. Work, heat, silence. Yet something imperceptible began to shift at Whisper Creek. The air still shimmered with dust, but the house no longer felt hollow. It carried sound now. The scrape of a bucket, the clang of a pot, the low murmur of two voices that rarely spoke yet always seemed to listen. Talise rose before dawn. She swept the floor, fed the horse, carried water from the well. Her bare feet made no sound on the packed earth. Nathan worked the corral, fixing fence posts. His shoulders burned red beneath the relentless sun. They seldom spoke while working, but when they passed, they exchanged small nods, a silent language that said, I see you, you're here. One afternoon, Nathan returned from checking fence posts to find Talise at his desk, quill in hand. She quickly covered the paper she'd been writing on. What are you doing? He asked, curious rather than accusing. Learning, she said simply. showing him the neat rows of letters she'd been practicing. Your books teach me. Nathan noticed she'd been copying from his old military logbook, but said nothing. If understanding the past helped her, he wouldn't interfere. She had not tried to kill him again, nor had she tried to escape. Where would she go? The reservation was worse than prison, and any Apache found off designated land was shot on sight. They were both trapped, he by his past, she by her circumstances. One morning, Nathan found her crouched by the pump, cursing softly in Apache as the handle jammed. He stepped behind her, reached over, and pressed down once. The pump wheezed, coughed, and sent a burst of cold water over their hands. Talise gasped and looked up at him, startled. Water dripped down both their wrists, shining like glass in the light. He gave a faint smile. You've got to twist it a bit first. For the first time, she smiled back. Not wide, but real. It became a routine. Him showing her the quirks of the homestead, her showing surprising skill with his tools and garden. She knew which plants would grow in the harsh soil, how to coax more yield from the struggling corn. Her hands, though small, were strong and capable. In the afternoons, when the heat drove even the cicadas to silence, Talise sat on the porch mending a torn shirt. Nathan would read old newspapers aloud, stumbling over faded words. She didn't understand much, but she liked the sound. His voice was rough and low, steady as a heartbeat. Sometimes she asked about words she heard often. Freedom, promise, peace. He never had simple answers. On these visits, Nathan noticed how Talise would sometimes speak quietly with the widow Johnson while he conducted his business. Once he glimpsed her passing a small package wrapped in cloth to the stern older woman. Making friends? He asked on their ride home. Talise's smile was enigmatic. The widow lost much to war, as did I. We understand each other. Nathan didn't press further. He was simply glad she'd found some connection in town beyond himself. Once she asked, You fought at Fort Bowie? He froze, paper halfway folded. Yes. Her eyes searched him for a long moment. You kill my people. He met her gaze. Yes. There was no excuse, no story, only truth. She nodded once and looked away. But that night, when she laid out her blanket, she placed it closer to the fire, closer to him. Weeks passed. Clearwater still whispered, the soldier and his Apache woman. A deputy came by one morning, spitting dust and warning Nathan that folks up top don't like seeing her free. Nathan stood in the doorway, hand resting near his hip where his holster used to be, but voice calm. She works for me, he said. She's under my roof, under my word. That's enough. The deputy sneered. Word of a man like you doesn't count for much. Nathan's eyes darkened, and it'll have to count for more. The man left without looking back. Talise watched from the porch, her hands clenched around the railing. That night, she left a small bundle of dried sage at his door. For strength, she said simply. Little by little, life took shape again. She learned how to grind grain with his old millstone. He learned the names of desert plants from her tongue. Kahi for yucca, bidzil for strength. Some evenings she sang softly as she worked, melodies without words that made the air seem gentler. Each night, when he thought she was asleep, Nathan would take out a wooden box from beneath the floorboards. Inside were tokens of the dead, a child's beaded bracelet, a sergeant's button, a piece of charred cloth, the ghosts he carried. He would touch each one, whispering apologies to the air. Talise saw him once but said nothing. The next day, she left a perfect eagle feather beside the box, a token for his ghosts, that they might find peace. Then came the night of the rain. The sky had been grumbling for days, clouds thick with dust and thunder. They were fixing the corral when the wind changed, carrying the scent of wet earth. Talise tilted her face upward, eyes closed as the first drop hit her skin. Rain, she whispered, almost laughing. Nathan leaned on the post, watching her. Haven't seen it in months. It comes when it's called, she said, if the heart remembers how. When the downpour finally came, it was sudden and wild. Water roared off the roof, spilling through the gutters, soaking the yard. Talise stepped out barefoot into it, arms open, spinning slowly under the storm. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her laughter rising above the rain. Nathan hesitated in the doorway, then stepped out too, letting the water run down his face like absolution. For a long time, they didn't speak. They just stood in it, two shapes blurred by silver rain. When he finally looked at her, she smiled through the curtain of water. You have rain now. He met her gaze, chest tightening. We have rain. That night, the world felt cleaner. The roof dripped. The smell of wet cedar filled the cabin. Nathan set a small tin cup of coffee in front of her. She took it carefully, hands trembling from the cold, and blew on the steam. Why you live here alone? She asked. He stared into his cup. I came back from the war with too many ghosts. This was the farthest place I could find. Talise nodded. Ghosts follow even into desert. Her words were not a warning but understanding. The following days, the air turned cooler, and something unspoken lingered between them. Not romance, not yet, but a quiet belonging, like two wounds learning how to close side by side. Nathan found himself waiting for her laugh, listening for her footsteps. Talise began humming as she worked, sometimes leaving little bundles of herbs by his tools for luck. One evening, she asked him about the gun mounted above the door. Dusty, unused for years. Why keep it if you won't shoot? Nathan considered the question. Reminder, I suppose. Of what? Of what I chose not to be. She studied him for a long moment. And what are you now instead? He had no answer for that. One evening, Nathan returned from town to find Talise kneeling on the floor, papers scattered around her. The drawer where he kept Harlan's letter was open. He stood in the doorway, cold washing through him. What are you doing? He asked too sharply. Her head snapped up. It has your name. He crossed the room in two strides, snatching the paper from her hands. You shouldn't touch things that aren't yours. Her voice trembled, though her eyes did not. Then tell me who sent it. It's nothing. She stepped closer. It is something. I know this mark. It speaks of soldiers. Drop it, Talise. But she didn't. Her hand shot forward, gripping his sleeve. Tell me. The paper crumpled between them. For a long moment, Nathan's jaw worked as if he were chewing on glass. Then quietly, it's from Captain Harlan, your friend. His laugh was dry, bitter. Once. She waited, the silence stretching between them like a drawn wire. Finally, he said, he sent you, called you a gift, a joke meant to shame me. Talisa's face drained of color. A gift? The word felt like poison in her mouth. He said I could prove I still had mercy left, Nathan muttered, his eyes on the floor. That maybe if I kept you alive, I'd earn it back. Her breath hitched. So I am your penance. He looked up then, guilt and pain carving deep lines in his face. No, you were never that. But she was already backing away, her voice raw. All this time you knew. Talise fled into the evening light, the door slamming behind her. Nathan stood frozen, the letter crushed in his hand, listening to the sound of her footsteps fading into the open valley. By the time he reached the barn, she was gone. The wind had risen again, whipping red dust through the mesquite. He saddled his horse with shaking hands and rode hard into the night. The storm came without warning, sheets of dust, low thunder rolling over the Chiricahua foothills. Each gust tore at his eyes and throat, but he pressed on, calling her name into the wind. Talise! Only the echo of his own guilt bouncing off the cliffs. Hours later, through the curtain of storm, he saw a small figure crouched by the dry creek bed. She was coated in grit, clutching something to her chest. When he dismounted, he realized it was the letter, creased, nearly torn apart. Talise, he said, voice raw, you'll die out here. She didn't look up. Why do you care? Maybe I should. He knelt beside her, reaching for her shoulder, but she flinched. Don't, she hissed. I thought you saw me. Not a thing they left behind. Rainless thunder cracked across the sky. Nathan closed his eyes. I did. I do. That letter, what he meant. It doesn't define what's happened here. Then what is this? Her words shook. You keep me because you pity me. He shook his head, rain or tears sliding down his face. Because if I let them take you back, they'll break you again. Because I can't stand another body buried in the name of mercy. She stared at him, her breath unsteady. You think I need saving? No, he whispered. I think I need forgiving. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The wind howled through the canyon like a beast. Then slowly, Talisa's fingers unclenched from the torn paper. It fluttered away, carried off into the storm. "Forgiveness is not mine to give," she said softly, "but you speak truth." Nathan lowered his head. "That's all I have left." Lightning lit the sky behind them, throwing their shadows long against the rock. Talise looked at him, really looked, and saw not a soldier, not an enemy, but a man worn thin by trying to make peace with ghosts that would never rest. Something in her chest loosened. When she reached out, her hand brushed his cheek, trembling. "Then we both are lost things," she murmured. "And lost things can walk together." He covered her hand with his, holding it there for a breath. Then another. The storm softened around them, wind easing into a low sigh. By dawn, they were riding back toward Whisper Creek. The world smelled of dust and renewal. Neither spoke. The silence was enough. As they reached the cabin, Nathan dismounted first and turned to help her down. Talise hesitated, then took his hand. Her palm was rough, cold, but alive. "You could have left me," she said. "I did once," he answered quietly. "I won't again." Behind them, the sky blushed pale gold. The letter that had nearly destroyed them was gone, buried somewhere under miles of red sand. But something new, fragile as dawn, had taken its place. The days after the storm came golden and calm, as if the desert itself had taken a long breath. The fields near Whisper Creek shimmered faintly green, and the scent of wet sage still lingered in the air. Talise hummed when she worked. Nathan caught himself listening more than he should have. He began to think, foolishly perhaps, that peace could last. But peace in the desert was always borrowed time. The sun had just started his climb when a rider appeared on the horizon, silhouette wavering in the morning heat. Nathan noticed him first, straightening from where he'd been mending a fence. His hand instinctively reached for a weapon that wasn't there. "Someone's coming," he called to Talise, who was hanging laundry on a line strung between two mesquite trees. She froze, eyes scanning the distance. Her shoulders tensed, a prey animal sensing danger. As the rider drew closer, Nathan recognized Deputy Wilson's lanky frame and the dusty gray horse he favored. The man pulled up 20 yards from the house, not bothering to dismount. "Morning, Reed," he called, pushing his hat back. His gaze flickered to Talise, who had moved closer to Nathan, her face carefully blank. "Ma'am." The forced politeness made Nathan wary. "What brings you out here, Deputy?" Wilson shifted in his saddle. "News from town. Thought you should know." He paused, seeming to relish the moment. "Captain Royce Harland is coming through Clearwater next week. Some kind of inspection tour." The name fell like a stone between them. Nathan felt Talise stiffen beside him, though she made no sound. "That's so." Nathan kept his voice neutral. "Don't see how that concerns me." Wilson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Word is he's asking about you and your situation here." Another glance at Talise. "Thought you might want to make arrangements." "Arrangements?" "For the woman, reservations exist for a reason, Reed." Nathan stepped on forward, jaw tight. "She stays here." The deputy shrugged. "Suit yourself, but Harlan carries weight with the territorial governor. If he decides she belongs at San Carlos," he left the threat unfinished. "Anyway, I've done my civic duty. Can't say you weren't warned." With that, he wheeled his horse around and rode back toward town, dust rising in his wake. Nathan stood motionless until the rider disappeared. When he turned, Talise was already walking toward the cabin, back straight, movements precise. "Talise." "I need to finish bread," she said, not looking back. Inside, she worked with quiet intensity, kneading dough with more force than necessary. Nathan watched from the doorway, words failing him. "We should talk about this," he finally said. Her hands paused, covered in flour. "What is to say? He comes, he takes me back, or he kills me, or you." She resumed kneading. Knitting changes. "I won't let that happen." A bitter smile touched her lips. "How will you stop it? With words? With your gun that gathers dust?" Nathan had no answer. They both knew the truth. One former soldier, disgraced and isolated, had no power against a man like Harlan. That afternoon, Talise was sweeping the kitchen when she noticed the drawer slightly ajar, the one where Nathan kept his important papers. Inside, beneath a pile of folded documents, a corner of yellowed paper peeked out. She pulled it free, smoothing the creases carefully. The writing was faded, but the seal and eagle stamped in wax was one she recognized. The Army. Fort Bowie. It was a discharge paper, dishonorable, with charges of insubordination and failure to follow direct orders in combat. At the bottom, Harlan's signature sprawled like a curse. Nathan came in from the yard just as she was staring at the page. "What are you doing?" he asked too sharply. Her head snapped up. "This is why he hates you." He crossed the room, gently taking the paper from her hands. "One of many reasons." "Tell me," she said. "Not a request." Nathan sat heavily at the table, the document before him. For a moment, he said nothing, just traced the official seal with one finger. "I was a sergeant," he began, voice low. "Believed in what we were doing, protecting settlers, keeping the peace." A hollow laugh. "That's what they told us anyway." Talise sat across from him, waiting. Harlan was zealous, saw the Apache as animals, obstacles to progress. "I have followed his orders for 2 years. Did things His throat worked. "Things I can't take back." "Then Battle Canyon," she prompted. He nodded. "We received intelligence that hostiles were gathering, planning attacks. When we arrived, I saw only families, children, elders." His eyes grew distant. "Harlan ordered us to fire, said they were hiding weapons, said the children would grow to be warriors if we let them live." Talisa's knuckles whitened where she gripped the edge of the table. "I refused, lowered my weapon, told the men to stand down." A shadow crossed his face. "Miller, my friend, shot me, right here." He touched his chest. "On Harlan's order. They left you to die. They should have made sure." His smile was grim. I crawled away. An old medicine man found me, treated my wound. By the time I recovered enough to walk, the massacre was over. The village burned. He met her eyes then. "I didn't know any survived." "Few did," she said. "I hid in the rocks with my grandmother. She died that winter. Soldiers found me wandering, took me to the reservation." Her voice flattened. "The rest you know." Nathan carefully refolded the discharge paper. "Now Harlan comes to finish what he started. Why does he hate you so much?" One soldier who said no. "Because I saw him for what he is, and because I lived to tell it." Nathan's eyes darkened. Men like Harlan can't abide witnesses. They sat in silence as afternoon shadows lengthened across the floor. Finally, Talise spoke. "When I first came, I thought of killing you in your sleep." The confession hung between them, stark and honest. Nathan nodded. "I know. Now he comes to kill us both." "Probably." Her eyes met his, unflinching. "Then we should be ready." In the days that followed, an unspoken agreement formed between them. If Harlan was coming, they would face him together. Nathan unearthed his old revolver from a trunk, cleaned and oiled it until it gleamed. He was a good shot, always had been, but 5 years of disuse had left his skills rusty. Each morning he practiced behind the barn, methodically putting bullets through a row of bottles. Talise watched him once, arms crossed. "You said you would never use it again." He lowered the gun. "Sometimes promises must bend so others can be kept." She considered this. "Teach me." Nathan hesitated. "It's not. If he comes for me, I will not die without fighting." Her eyes flashed. "Teach me." So he did. Her hands were smaller than his, but steady. She learned quickly, her focus intense. By the fourth day, she could hit the center bottle more often than not. "You're a natural," he said, surprised. A shadow crossed her face. "My father taught my brothers to shoot. I watched." In the evenings, they prepared in other ways. Nathan showed her hiding places on the property. The root cellar beneath the barn, the narrow space behind the chimney stack. Talise gathered medicinal herbs, prepared poultices, stored them in clay jars. "For after," she said simply. Neither spoke the fear aloud, that there might not be an after. On the fifth night, as they sat on the porch watching darkness gather across the valley, Talise broke their companionable silence. "Why did you take me in? Truth this time." Nathan considered his answer carefully. "When Harlan sent you here, he expected me to turn you away, to prove him right, that my mercy at Battle Canyon was momentary weakness, not conviction." He looked at his hands, rough and weathered. "I took you in because it was right, and because I'm tired of letting him win." Talise nodded slowly. "And now?" Now he turned to her, features softened by twilight. Now you stay because this is your home. If you want it to be. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, perhaps even hope. But before she could respond, the distant sound of hoofbeats made them both tense. Two riders approached from the direction of Clearwater, silhouettes dark against the purple sky. Nathan stood, hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Stay behind me," he murmured. But as the riders drew closer, he recognized the broad shoulders of Tom Baker, the blacksmith, and the slight figure of his son Michael beside him. "Evening, Reed," Tom called, reining in his horse. "Hope we're not disturbing you." "Tom," Nathan relaxed slightly. "Bit late for a social call." The blacksmith dismounted with a grunt, his son following. "Figured you'd want to hear this right away." He glanced at Talise, who had remained on the porch. "Ma'am." She inclined her head but said nothing. "Harland arrived early," Tom said without preamble. "Came in on the afternoon train with 2 soldiers. They're staying at Wilson's boarding house." Nathan felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Did he ask about me?" "Not directly, but he and Wilson had a long talk at the saloon. Lot of glances your way when they thought no one was looking." Michael, barely 16, stepped forward eagerly. "Mr. Harper overheard them talking about dealing with the Reed situation tomorrow." "Harper?" Nathan frowned. "The store owner?" Tom nodded. "He sent us. Figured a warning might be appreciated, given the circumstances." Nathan studied the blacksmith's weathered face, remembering fragments he'd heard over the years. Tom had lost his eldest son at Dragoon Springs in what the Army called a necessary engagement. But rumors told a different story, one that echoed Battle Canyon's tragedy. "Your boy," Nathan said quietly. "He was under Harlan's command, wasn't he?" Something flickered in Tom's eyes, an old grief, carefully contained. "James, good soldier. Wrote home saying his commander was leading them into something bad. Next letter we got was from the Army, saying he died honorably." A bitter smile crossed his face. "Later heard he questioned orders, died with a bullet in his back that wasn't Apache." His eyes flicked to Talise again. "I appreciate it," Nathan said, "but you've put yourselves at risk coming here." The blacksmith shrugged massive shoulders. "Some risks are worth taking." He hesitated. "There's more. Folk in town are talking. About you two. They always talk. Different now. Some are saying it ain't right what Harlan's planning. Harper, the widow Johnson, even old Peterson." Tom met Nathan's surprised look. "Not everyone's forgotten that you saved Peterson's boy during that flash flood 2 springs back. That was nothing. Anyone would have, but they didn't. You did." Tom adjusted his hat. "What I'm saying is, you might have more friends than you think." After they'd gone, Nathan and Talise sat in silence, absorbing the news. The night had deepened around them, stars pricking the velvet sky. "Tomorrow," Talise finally said. "Seems so." "We should leave. Tonight." Nathan shook his head. "And go where? The territory's crawling with patrols. They'd catch us within days." His hand found hers in the darkness. "Besides, I'm tired of running." Her fingers tightened around his. "Then we face him. Together." That night, neither of them slept much. Nathan cleaned his revolver one final time, loaded it carefully. Talise prepared a small bundle of belongings, just in case. In the darkest hours, they sat at the kitchen table, a single candle between them, and talked of things they had never spoken of before. Nathan told her about his childhood in Ohio, the sister he'd lost to fever, his father's farm. Talise spoke of her mother's songs, the ceremonies of her people, the legends of mountains that breathed. They shared memories like precious stones, each one a weight being set down, a trust being offered. In the gray light before dawn, Talise took his hand and led him outside. The air was cool, sweet with the scent of desert flowers that bloomed only in these brief moments between night and day. "My people have a saying," she said softly. "Before facing death, touch the earth that made you." Together they knelt in the dust. Nathan felt the ground solid beneath his palms, felt the vibration of the world turning. Talise murmured words in Apache, her eyes closed. Then she took a pinch of soil and touched it to his forehead, then hers. "Now we are ready," she said. The sun rose blood red over the eastern hills. They ate a simple breakfast, movements measured and calm. Nathan strapped on his gun belt. Talise braided her hair tightly, threaded with a strip of red cloth, a warrior's preparation. They were washing the breakfast dishes when they heard it. Horses approaching, not bothering with stealth. Nathan moved to the window. 3 riders coming fast. "They're here," he said. Talise dried her hands deliberately on her apron. "So it begins." Nathan opened the door and stepped onto the porch, Talise beside him. The morning light caught the brass buttons on Harlan's uniform as he reined in his horse. Flanking him were 2 soldiers Nathan didn't recognize, young men with hard eyes. "Reed." Harlan's voice was exactly as Nathan remembered, cultured, confident, with an undertone of cruelty. "Still alive, I see." "Captain." Nathan kept his tone neutral, though his heart hammered against his ribs. Harlan dismounted with fluid grace, spurs jingling. He was older, silver threading his dark hair, lines carved deeper around his mouth, but still carried himself with the arrogance of a man accustomed to unquestioned obedience. "Actually, it's Major now." His smile didn't reach his eyes as they flicked to Talise. "And I see my gift has been put to good use. How touching." Nathan felt her tense beside him, but was proud when she didn't flinch. "What do you want, Harlan?" Nathan asked, though he already knew. "Just passing through. Thought I'd check on an old comrade." He mounted the porch steps slowly, deliberately. "And to correct an administrative oversight, the Apache woman needs to be returned to the reservation, where she belongs. She stays here." Harlan's smile thinned. "That's not your decision, I'm afraid. She's a ward of the government. She's a free woman under my protection." A bark of laughter. Protection? From the man who couldn't protect his own unit, who betrayed his brothers in arms? Harlan shook his head in mock sadness. "Your protection is worth less than nothing, Reed." The soldiers behind him shifted, hands near their weapons. Nathan was acutely aware of being outnumbered, outgunned. "I have papers," Harlan continued, producing an official-looking document. "Signed by the territorial governor himself. The woman returns with me. Today." "My name is Talise," she said suddenly, her voice clear and strong. "And I am not your property to take." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "You've taught it to talk back. How progressive of you, Reed." "She's right," Nathan said. "This is her home now." "Home?" Harlan looked around with exaggerated disdain. "This pile of sticks and dirt? Fitting, I suppose? A hovel for a coward and his savage." Nathan's hand inched toward his revolver. Harlan noticed, smile widening. "Planning to shoot me, Reed? In front of witnesses?" "That would be convenient. Murder of an army officer carries a hanging sentence." He stepped closer, voice dropping to a near whisper. "Do it. Give me the excuse I've been waiting for." "Nathan," Talise's voice cut through the tension. "Don't." Harlan's gaze swung to her, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. "So it's Nathan now, is it? How domestic you've become." One of the soldiers behind him coughed nervously. "Sir, should we proceed with the arrest?" "Arrest?" Nathan's blood ran cold. Harlan's smile was vicious now. "Did I forget to mention? The woman is wanted for theft from the Indian agency at San Carlos. Silver candlesticks, I believe. Very valuable." "That's a lie," Talise said, but her voice wavered. "Is it? I have sworn statements from 3 witnesses." Harlan turned to his men. "Bring her." The soldiers started forward, but Nathan stepped between them and Talise, hand now firmly on his revolver. "You'll have to go through me first." For a moment, no one moved. The morning air seemed to crystallize around them, fragile as glass. Then, from down the road came the sound of approaching horses, many of them. All heads turned. A group of riders appeared, dust rising behind them. As they drew closer, Nathan recognized Tom Baker at the front. Beside him, Harper from the general store. Behind them rode at least a dozen townspeople. Peterson the banker, the widow Johnson, Michael Baker and others Nathan barely knew. Harlan's face darkened. "What is this?" Tom Baker dismounted, shotgun cradled in his arms. "Heard there might be trouble out at Reed's place. Thought we'd come see for ourselves." "This is military business, civilian. I suggest you leave." "Funny thing about that," Harper said, stepping forward. His usual meek demeanor had vanished. We've been talking, and seems to us that a major harassing private citizens isn't military business at all. Harper's usual nervous demeanor had vanished, replaced by unexpected resolve. Nathan recalled how the storekeeper had arrived in Clearwater 5 years ago, the same time Nathan had settled at Whisper Creek. The man rarely spoke of his past, but the careful way he eyed military uniforms told its own story. "Never thought I'd see you standing up to a uniform, Harper," Nathan remarked later. "Some debts can only be paid in courage, Reed," the storekeeper replied cryptically, adjusting his spectacles. "Before Clearwater, I was a clerk for the Indian Affairs Office. Saw enough reports, changed enough numbers to make massacres look like battles." His voice dropped. "Some nights I still hear them. The numbers I turned into ghosts." The widow Johnson, a stern woman who'd lost her husband to Apache raids years before, spoke up. "I've no love for Indians, Major, but this woman has caused no trouble. And Reed's a neighbor, however strange his choices." Harlan's face flushed with anger. "This is sedition. I'll have you all arrested." "On what charge?" Peterson asked mildly. "Last I checked, visiting a neighbor wasn't against the law." The banker adjusted his spectacles. "Besides, we've sent a telegram to the territorial governor asking about these theft charges. Curious to hear his response." Harlan's confident facade cracked slightly. "You're interfering with official business." "No," Tom Baker said. "We're stopping a personal vendetta. There's a difference." The major's hand moved to his sidearm, but he froze when a dozen weapons raised in response. Even his own soldiers looked uncertain now, eyeing the crowd of determined townspeople. "You're making a mistake," Harlan said, voice tight with fury. "All of you." "Maybe so," Tom replied, "but it's our mistake to make." For a long moment the tableau held. Harlan, frozen with rage. The townspeople, weapons steady. Nathan and Talise, disbelieving witnesses to this unexpected alliance. Then with deliberate slowness, Harlan stepped back. "This isn't over, Reed," he said softly. "Not by a long shot." He mounted his horse with military precision, the two soldiers hastily following suit. As he turned to go, his eyes met Talise's one final time. "Enjoy your freedom while it lasts, savage. The reservation will always be waiting." With that, he wheeled his horse around and galloped away, his men close behind. The dust from their departure hung in the air like a fading threat. Nathan turned to the townspeople, struggling to find words. "I don't know what to say." Tom Baker shrugged, lowering his shotgun. "Nothing to say. Neighbors look out for each other. That's how it works out here." "But after everything, the rumors..." "Rumors are just that, rumors," Harper said. "Actions matter more. You've been fair in your dealings, helped when needed. That counts for something." The widow Johnson sniffed. "Don't mistake this for approval, Reed. Your arrangement is still highly irregular. But Harlan's a snake. Always was." Peterson nodded. "Man like that, throwing his weight around, reminds folks why they came west in the first place. To get away from such types." One by one, they offered awkward words of support, then mounted up to return to town. Last to leave was Tom Baker, who hesitated before Nathan. "He won't give up, you know. Man like Harlan being humiliated publicly, he'll be back." "I know," Nathan said quietly. "When he comes, send word. You won't stand alone." After they'd gone, Nathan and Talise remained on the porch, stunned by the morning's events. The sun was high now, beating down on the dusty yard where so much had changed in so little time. "I don't understand," Talise finally said. "Why would they help us?" Nathan shook his head, equally bewildered. "I'm not sure. I've barely spoken to most of them in years." "The blacksmith said, 'Neighbors help neighbors.'" "Yes, but..." Nathan struggled to articulate his confusion. "I've been an outsider since I arrived. The disgraced soldier who turned on his own. They had no reason to stand with me." Talise considered this. "Perhaps they did not stand with you. Perhaps they stood against him." "Harlan?" She nodded. "A bully. A man who uses power to hurt those weaker." Her eyes met his. People recognize such men, even when they wear uniforms with shiny buttons. Nathan thought about this, about the surprising courage of the townspeople he'd kept at arm's length for so long. Perhaps he'd been wrong about them. Perhaps, in judging himself unworthy of community, he'd misjudged their capacity for justice. "He'll be back," he said, echoing Tom's warning. Yes, Talisa's expression was solemn but unafraid. But now we know we are not alone. That evening, as the day's heat began to fade, they sat together on the porch steps. The confrontation had left them drained but somehow lighter, as if a burden long carried had been partially lifted. "What happens now?" Talisa asked, watching the sunset paint the western hills. Nathan considered the question. "We keep living, keep working the land." He paused. "If that's what you want." She turned to him, face serious. "When I first came here, I had no choice. Now I do." Her hand found his, fingers interlacing. "I choose to stay." Something warm bloomed in Nathan's chest, fragile but growing. "Then we'll face whatever comes, together." The next morning dawned clear and bright. They were eating breakfast when a rider appeared, Michael Baker, Tom's son, galloping his horse hard. Nathan met him in the yard, alarm rising at the boy's breathless urgency. "Mr. Reed," Michael gasped, "you need to come. It's Harland." "What's happened?" "He's tearing up the town. Arrested my pa. Says he'll hold him until the Apache woman is turned over." The boy's eyes were wide with fear. "There's soldiers everywhere." Nathan turned to find Talise standing in the doorway, her face pale but resolved. "I'll go," she said immediately. "No." Nathan's response was instant, visceral. "We're not giving in to him. He will hurt more people. Because of me. Not because of you, because he's a tyrant who can't stand being defied." Nathan turned back to Michael. "How many soldiers?" "4, plus the major. They've taken over the sheriff's office." Nathan nodded grimly. "Ride back. Tell your mother to stay indoors. I'll be there soon." As the boy galloped away, Nathan went to the barn and began saddling his horse. Talise followed. "What will you do?" she asked. "I don't know yet." He tightened the cinch with more force than necessary. "But I won't let him use innocent people as pawns." "Then I come too." "Talise, no." Her voice was firm. "This is my fight as much as yours. More, perhaps." She placed a hand on his arm. "You taught me to shoot. Now let me stand beside you." Nathan looked at her, this woman who had survived massacre, captivity, and displacement, who had every reason to hate him, but had chosen understanding instead. Her eyes held the same quiet determination he had come to rely on, to admire. "All right," he said softly. "Together." They rode side by side into Clearwater, tension building with each mile. The town appeared unusually quiet as they approached. Doors closed, windows shuttered, the usual bustle of mid-morning absent. "Something's wrong," Nathan murmured, as they dismounted in front of the general store. The street was deserted except for a single figure on the boardwalk. Harper, the store owner, face tight with worry. "Reed," he hissed, hurrying over. "You shouldn't have come. It's a trap." "Where's Tom?" "Jailed, along with Peterson and 2 others who spoke up." Harper glanced nervously at the sheriff's office down the street. "Harlan's lost his mind. Says he's detaining insurgents until the Apache woman is surrendered." "Her name is Talise," Nathan said quietly, "and she's not property to be surrendered." "Noble sentiment," came a familiar voice, "but utterly impractical." Harlan emerged from the shadows of the alley beside the store, revolver drawn. Behind him, 2 soldiers appeared at either end of the street, rifles aimed. "I knew you'd come," Harlan continued, smiling thinly. "So predictable in your gallantry, Reed, always rushing to the rescue." His gaze shifted to Talise. "And you brought the prize. How considerate." Nathan's hand moved to his gun, but Harlan shook his head. "I wouldn't. My men are excellent shots. You'd be dead before you cleared leather." He gestured with his revolver. "Now let's make this civilized. The woman comes with me. You can go free. Simple transaction. And if I refuse, then things get messy. For you, for her, for the good citizens currently enjoying my hospitality." Harlan's smile widened. "Your choice, Reed. Be reasonable for once in your miserable life." Nathan felt the trap closing around them, options dwindling. He glanced at Talise, saw the fear she was fighting to control, the resolve beneath it. "There must be another way," he said, stalling for time. "There isn't, not anymore." Harlan stepped closer. "You had your chance at Battle Canyon. Chose the wrong side." Everything since then, your disgrace, your isolation, this pathetic attempt at redemption, it's all been the consequence of that choice. The wrong side, Nathan's voice hardened. I refuse to massacre innocents. There are no innocents in war. Harlan's composure cracked, revealing the rage beneath. Only victories and defeats, the strong and the weak, those who act and those who hesitate. He leveled the gun at Nathan's chest. You hesitated. The street fell silent. Nathan could hear his own heartbeat, feel Talisa's presence beside him, solid and real. In that moment, with a clarity that surprised him, he understood that Harlan had never been fighting against the Apache, never been defending civilization. He had been waging war against his own humanity, against the parts of himself that might feel compassion or doubt. You're right, Nathan said quietly. I hesitated. Because I'm human. Because some lines shouldn't be crossed, even in war. He straightened, unarmed but unafraid, and I'd make the same choice again. Harlan's face contorted with contempt. Then you'll die a fool. No, Talisa's voice cut through the tension. He will not die today. She stepped forward, placing herself between Nathan and Harlan's gun. Her movement was so unexpected that even Harlan blinked in surprise. If you want me, she said, and take me, but leave him and the others. Talise, don't, Nathan started, but she silenced him with a look. I choose this, she said softly. Then to Harlan, release the prisoners first. Then I will go with you. Harlan considered her offer, suspicion warring with triumph. How noble, sacrificing yourself for these white settlers who would just as soon see you dead. Not for them, she replied, for him, and for myself. Her eyes never wavered. Do we have an agreement? After a long moment, Harlan nodded. Sergeant, he called to one of the soldiers, release the prisoners from the jail. Sir, are you? Do it, Harlan snapped. The woman is surrendering herself. Honor demands we keep our end of the bargain. As the soldier hurried to obey, Nathan gripped Talisa's arm. You can't do this. He'll kill you. No, she said with strange confidence. He won't. Not yet. What do you mean? But before she could answer, the jail door opened, and Tom Baker emerged, followed by Peterson and the others. They looked confused but unharmed. Satisfied? Harlan asked, impatient now. Come, woman, time to go. Talise turned to Nathan one last time. Her hand brushed his cheek, a gesture of tenderness that made his throat tight with unshed tears. Trust me, she whispered. Then she walked steadily toward Harlan, head high, dignity intact despite everything. The major grabbed her arm roughly, a smile of victory spreading across his face. Finally, he said, justice is served. Not yet, came a new voice, strong and unexpected. All heads turned to see a tall figure at the end of the street, a man in the formal attire of a government official, flanked by 4 uniformed marshals. He strode forward with authority, stopping several paces from Harlan. Major Royce Harlan, the man asked. Harlan frowned. Who's asking? James Mercer, special investigator for the Department of the Interior. He produced an official-looking document. I have orders for your immediate suspension and detention pending investigation of charges of corruption, abuse of power, and falsification of military reports. The street went utterly silent. Harlan's face drained of color, then flushed dark with rage. This is preposterous, he sputtered. On whose authority? The president's, Mercer replied calmly. We've received some very interesting testimony about your actions at Fort Bowie, particularly regarding the incident at Battle Canyon. Harlan's eyes darted to Nathan, then to Talise. Testimony? From whom? These two? A disgraced soldier and a savage woman? Hardly credible witnesses. Actually, Mercer said, from Lieutenant Colonel James Whitmore, who took command after your transfer. He found your reports inconsistent with physical evidence and with statements from other survivors. Survivors? Harlan's voice had lost its confident edge. Yes, it seems the massacre you reported as a necessary military action against armed hostiles was, in fact, an unprovoked attack on a peaceful settlement, a settlement that had signed a treaty just weeks before. Mercer's expression hardened. A treaty you deliberately violated. Nathan felt as if the ground were shifting beneath him. For years, he'd believed he was alone in his knowledge of what had truly happened at Battle Canyon. to learn that others had questioned, had investigated, that the truth might finally emerge. Harlan's grip on Talise loosened as panic set in. This is a mistake, a misunderstanding. I was following orders. Whose orders, Major? Mercer pressed. Because according to the official record, you were the commanding officer. The responsibility was yours. For the first time, Harlan seemed at a loss. His carefully constructed world of power and impunity was crumbling around him. He looked desperately at his men, but they had lowered their weapons, uncertainty written across their young faces. Surrendering now would be wise, Mercer advised. These marshals are authorized to take you by force if necessary. Harlan's face twisted with fury and desperation. In a sudden, violent movement, he grabbed Talise, pressing his revolver to her temple. "Stay back!" he shouted as the marshals drew their weapons. "One step closer and she dies." Nathan tensed, heart pounding. Talise's eyes met his across the street, calm despite the gun at her head. "Release her, Harlan," Mercer ordered. "You're only making this worse for yourself." "Shut up! Harlan's voice had risen to a near shriek. "I'm leaving now. She's coming with me as insurance. Anyone follows, she dies. Understood?" He began backing away, dragging Talise with him. The townspeople watched in horrified silence. The marshals held their positions, weapons trained but unable to risk a shot with Talise as a shield. Nathan stepped forward. "Harlan," he said quietly, "this ends now. Let her go." "Back off, Reed." The major's hand was shaking now, the revolver wavering against Talise's temple. "This is your fault. All of it. You and your damned conscience." "Maybe so," Nathan acknowledged, "but killing her won't change anything. It won't make you right." "You don't understand," Harlan hissed. "You never did. The territory needed men like me, men willing to do what was necessary." "Necessary?" Nathan took another step closer. "Was it necessary to order the death of women and children, to burn homes, to lie about it afterward?" Harlan's eyes were wild now. They were a threat. All of them, their very existence, a challenge to progress, to civilization. His voice dropped, almost pleading. "Why couldn't you see that? Why did you have to question me? In front of the men?" The raw need for validation in Harlan's voice struck Nathan like a physical blow. He saw perhaps for the first time the fear that drove the man's cruelty. Fear of being wrong, of being questioned, of losing control. "Let her go, Royce," he said gently, using the major's first name. "It's over." For a moment, something almost human flickered in Harlan's eyes. Then his face hardened again. "Never," he spat. "I'll die before I surrender to—" A sharp crack echoed through the street as Talise drove her elbow into Harlan's ribs with surprising force. He gasped, his grip loosening just enough for her to twist away. The revolver discharged, the bullet embedding itself in a nearby hitching post. Before Harlan could recover, Nathan was on him, tackling him to the ground. The gun skittered away across the dirt. They grappled, years of rage and pain concentrated into this single desperate struggle. Harlan fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, landing a solid blow to Nathan's jaw that sent stars across his vision. But Nathan had worked the land for 5 years. Hard, physical labor that had built strength Harlan's officer's lifestyle couldn't match. With a final surge of effort, he pinned the major's arms, holding him immobile against the dirt. The marshals rushed forward, securing Harlan with manacles. As they hauled him to his feet, he glared at Nathan with pure hatred. "This isn't justice," he snarled. "This is betrayal of everything we fought for." Nathan stood slowly, wiping blood from his split lip. "No, Royce, this is exactly what we should have been fighting for. The rule of law, applied equally to everyone, even men with stars on their collars." As the marshals led Harlan away, Talise appeared at Nathan's side. Without a word, she took his hand, fingers interlacing with his. They stood together, watching as the man who had cast such a long shadow over both their lives was finally removed from power. Investigator Mercer approached them, hat in hand. "Mr. Reed, I must thank you for your assistance in this matter." Nathan shook his head, confused. "I didn't do anything. On the contrary, your written testimony was quite valuable to our investigation." "My testimony? I never gave any." Mercer glanced at Talise, a small smile playing at his lips. Perhaps I should clarify. Several months ago, our office received a package. Inside was a detailed account of the Battle Canyon incident, along with your military records and evidence of Major Harlan's subsequent fabrications. It was signed with your name. Nathan turned to Talise in bewilderment. Did you? She shook her head. Not I. The package, Mercer continued, was delivered by a Mr. Harper, said it had been entrusted to him by the widow Johnson, who claimed to have received it from a passing trader. The package, Mercer continued, wasn't just your testimony. It contained corroborating statements, names, dates, locations that matched other reports. Later, when they were alone, Nathan noticed how Tom, Harper, and Peterson exchanged knowing glances. You all had a hand in this, didn't you? He asked. Each of you contributed something. Tom shrugged massive shoulders. Harper had the documents. Peterson had the connections to get it to the right people. Widow Johnson kept it hidden until the time was right. He looked Nathan in the eye. Some wrongs are too big for one man to right alone. The store owner stepped forward, looking sheepish. I didn't read it, he assured them. Just followed Mrs. Johnson's instructions to mail it to the territorial governor's office if anything untoward happened to either of you. Nathan's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. But I never wrote any testimony, never sent any package. Curious, Mercer said, not sounding particularly concerned. Nevertheless, the information proved accurate when cross-referenced with other evidence, almost as if someone wanted justice to be served, with or without your direct involvement. He bowed slightly. In any case, the department extends its gratitude and its apologies for the injustices you both suffered. As the investigator walked away, Nathan turned to Talise. Did you know this would happen when you offered yourself to Harland? She smiled enigmatically. I knew something would happen. The spirits told me. Spirits? Or perhaps it was hope. Her eyes softened. I chose to believe that truth could not stay buried forever, that someone somewhere remembered. Around them, the town of Clearwater was coming back to life. People emerged from buildings, gathering in small groups to discuss the extraordinary events they'd just witnessed. Tom Baker approached, clapping Nathan on the shoulder. Well, the blacksmith said, that was something to see. Nathan nodded, still dazed by the rapid turn of events. Did you know about the testimony? Tom's expression grew thoughtful. Let's just say some of us have been waiting a long time for Harlan to get what he deserves. When your Apache lady started coming to town with you, asking questions about Battle Canyon, showing bits of your old journals she'd copied, asking who might remember, well, memories got stirred up. Nathan looked at Talise in surprise. You were investigating, making copies of my journals? All those times you came to town with me? She met his gaze steadily. I learned your written words, found those who would listen. The widow Johnson said she knew people who could make truth reach important ears. And you didn't tell me because you had buried your past so deeply. I feared what digging it up might do to you. Her hand touched his cheek gently. Some wounds need time before they can be reopened for proper healing. Nathan felt a complex mix of emotions, amazement at her foresight and courage, humility at how deeply she had understood his pain, gratitude for her patient healing of wounds he hadn't even recognized. As the sun began to set over Clearwater, casting the street in golden light, the townspeople gathered at the saloon to celebrate their unexpected liberation from Harlan's intimidation. For the first time, Nathan and Talise were invited to join, no longer outsiders but members of a community that had finally chosen justice over fear. They sat together at a corner table, somewhat overwhelmed by the sudden inclusion. The widow Johnson herself brought them cups of coffee, her usual stern expressions softened by the day's events. Never thought I'd serve an Apache at my table, she admitted gruffly. But you've got spine, girl. Can respect that. The widow's stern face softened momentarily as she looked at Talise. My Henry always said the war with your people was our greatest shame. She set down the cups with precision. He rode with the cavalry for 12 years, came home broken by what he'd seen, what he'd done. She straightened her apron with dignity. Before he passed, he made me promise to remember that justice doesn't follow badges or uniforms. It follows conscience. A ghost of a smile. He'd have liked you, Reed, Man who chose right over easy. Talise inclined her head. Thank you for your help. With the package. The older woman sniffed. Did what needed doing, that's all. She glanced at Nathan. Your man here saved my Eliza during that flash flood. Didn't forget that. As she walked away, Nathan shook his head in wonder. All this time, I thought they hated me. Not hate, Talise said thoughtfully. Fear, perhaps, of what you represented. A man who stood against his own kind for what he believed right. She took his hand across the table. Such men are dangerous and necessary. Later, as they rode back to Whisper Creek under a canopy of stars, a comfortable silence settled between them. The events of the day had shifted something fundamental, not just in their circumstances, but in their understanding of each other. At the crest of the hill overlooking their small homestead, they paused. The cabin below was dark, peaceful in the moonlight. The land around it stretched in all directions, harsh but beautiful, full of challenges but also possibilities. What happens now, Talise asked, echoing her question from the night before, but with new meaning in the wake of Harlan's arrest. Nathan considered, looking out over the land that had been his refuge and was now becoming something more. A home, a future. We live, he said simply. We build something here. Together. Talise smiled, the moonlight catching in her dark eyes. Together, she agreed. As they rode down toward the cabin, Nathan felt the weight of the past. Battle Canyon, Harlan, the years of isolation, begin to lift. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. Prejudice didn't disappear overnight. Legal battles regarding Talise's status might still come. The land itself remained demanding and unforgiving. But for the first time since he'd walked away from Fort Bowie with a bullet in his chest and blood on his conscience, Nathan Reed felt something like peace. And riding beside him was a woman who had every reason to hate him, but had chosen instead to see him, truly see him, and walk the difficult path of healing alongside him. The desert night embraced them as they returned to the place that was now, undeniably, home. Autumn crept quietly across San Simon Valley. The days were still warm, but the light had softened, turning the dust into something almost golden. Whisper Creek ran shallow again, yet its trickle sounded like a song, soft, persistent, alive. Weeks had passed since Harlan's arrest. Word had spread through the territory, a major disgrace, charges of war crimes and corruption, a court-martial pending in the capital. Some called it justice long overdue. Others muttered about dangerous precedents in coddling savages. But in Clearwater, a tentative peace had settled, a collective exhale after years of holding breath. For Nathan and Talise, life had acquired a rhythm that neither had dared hope for. Each morning they rose with the sun, worked side by side in the strengthening garden, repaired fences, tended to the small herd of goats they'd acquired from the widow Johnson. Can't abide the creeters, but they give good milk. Consider it payment for that business with Harlan. This morning, Nathan stood at the edge of their property, surveying the changes. A new corral gleamed with fresh-cut wood. The cabin roof, once patched haphazardly, now boasted even cedar shingles. Most remarkably, green pushed through the soil in neat rows, corn standing shoulder-high, beans climbing makeshift trellises, squash spreading their broad leaves along the ground. Talise's knowledge of desert planting, combined with his labor, had coaxed life from the reluctant earth. "Rider coming?" Talise called from the porch, where she was shelling beans into a wooden bowl. Nathan squinted against the sun. A lone horseman approached from the direction of Clearwater, the silhouette familiar. "It's Michael Baker," he said as the blacksmith's son drew closer. The boy reined in his horse, grinning widely. At 16, Michael had appointed himself their unofficial messenger, bringing news and mail from town each week, and staying for Talise's cornbread if he timed his arrival right. "Morning, Mr. Reed. Morning, Miss Talise," he called, dismounting with youthful energy. "Got something for you." He patted his saddlebag importantly. "Come in, then," Nathan said, smiling despite himself. The boy's enthusiasm was infectious. "I'm sure there's coffee." Inside, Talise had already set out cups and a plate of cornbread, as if she'd anticipated their visitor. Michael settled at the table, pulling a thick envelope from his bag. "From the Capitol," he announced. "Pa says it looks official." Nathan took the envelope, noting the territorial governor's seal. His stomach tightened. Official correspondence rarely brought good news in his experience. There's talk in town, Michael continued, mouth already full of cornbread. About the trial. Harlan's court-martial? Nathan asked, still turning the envelope in his hands. The boy nodded. They say he's got powerful friends trying to make it all disappear. Railroad men, politicians who don't want certain questions asked. He swallowed, looking suddenly older than his years. Pa says some truths are too expensive for the government to admit. Talise set a cup of coffee before the boy, her face carefully neutral. But Nathan saw the concern in the tightness around her eyes. They'd both known this might happen, that Harlan's influence might reach beyond his arrest, that the justice they'd glimpsed might prove ephemeral. What else does your father say? Nathan asked quietly. Michael hesitated. That you two should be careful. That not everyone's happy about things changing. The unspoken reality hung in the air. Despite the acceptance they'd found in Clearwater, the wider world remained hostile to the idea of a white man and an Apache woman building a life together. Their temporary reprieve might not last. Thank you for the warning, Nathan said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. And for bringing this. He held up the unopened envelope. After Michael had gone, promising to return next week with more news, Nathan and Talise sat at the table, the official envelope between them like a living thing. Open it, Talise said finally. Whatever it contains, we will face it. Nathan broke the seal and unfolded the document inside. As he read, his expression shifted from tension to disbelief. What is it? Talise asked, leaning forward. It's your papers, he said, voice rough with emotion. Certificate of residency. Freedom papers. He looked up, stunned. They're recognizing you as a free citizen, not subject to reservation confinement. Talise's hand flew to the blue bead at her throat, fingers closing around it as if for support. How is this possible? There's a letter. Nathan unfolded a second page. From Investigator Mercer. He says it's in recognition of your assistance in the Harlan investigation and as partial reparation for the injustices at Battle Canyon. Reparation, she repeated, the foreign word strange on her tongue. It means they're acknowledging the wrong that was done, trying to make amends. Can paper undo death? She asked softly. Can it bring back my family? Nathan set the documents down. No, he admitted, but it means you're free, Talise. Legally free. No one can force you back to the reservation. No one can take you away. She took the papers, running her fingers over the official seals and signatures. Symbols of the power that had dictated her people's fate for so long, now being used to grant her a measure of autonomy. I was always free, she said finally. Here. She touched her heart. Then, with the ghost of a smile, but it is good that they now agree. That night they celebrated in their own quiet way. Nathan opened a bottle of whiskey he'd been saving for a special occasion. Talise prepared a feast, venison stew with wild onions, cornbread sweetened with honey from the hives they'd established in spring, roasted squash from their garden. They ate on the porch, watching the sunset paint the western hills in shades of fire. Will there be others? Talise asked as darkness settled around them. Other Apache-granted freedom papers? Nathan sipped his whiskey, considering. I don't know. Mercer's letter mentioned your case being special circumstances. I'm not sure they're ready for broader changes. She nodded, having expected this answer. One step then. A beginning. A beginning, he agreed. As night deepened, they spoke of plans that had seemed foolish to contemplate before. Expanding the garden next spring, perhaps adding a room to the cabin, maybe even visiting the settlement of Apache freedmen rumored to exist near the southern border. We could go, Nathan said, the whiskey warming his blood and loosening his usual caution. See if others from your clan survived. Build connections. Talise leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Perhaps, but this is home now. Her hand found his in the darkness. With you. The simplicity of her declaration struck him with unexpected force. Home. Such a small word to carry so much meaning. After years of wandering, of feeling displaced even in his own skin, Nathan Reed had found home. Not in a place, but in a person who saw him as he truly was and chose to remain. He turned to her, words suddenly insufficient. Their lips met in the darkness, a kiss that spoke of shared pain transformed into something healing, something whole. When they finally drew apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads touching. "Talise," he whispered, her name a prayer in the desert night. "I know," she answered simply. They made love for the first time that night, in the small bed that had been his alone for so long. Their coming together was tentative at first, then urgent, bodies learning each other's landscapes, finding unexpected tenderness in calloused hands and scarred skin. Afterward, they lay entwined, her head on his chest where the old bullet wound had healed into a star-shaped scar. "Your heart," she murmured, fingers tracing the mark. "It beats strongly for a man who was left to die." "It has good reason to beat now," he said, pressing a kiss to her hair. Sleep claimed them as the coyotes began their nightly chorus, nature's ancient lullaby to the desert's unlikely lovers. With the dawn came soft rain, a gentle blessing that turned the air sweet with the scent of wet sage and creosote. They moved through the morning's chores with a new awareness of each other, exchanging glances that held secret warmth, fingers brushing with deliberate tenderness. Nathan was splitting wood when he noticed riders approaching. 3 of them, moving at a steady pace. His hand instinctively went to the knife at his belt, old caution resurfacing. "Talise," he called softly. She appeared in the doorway, saw the riders, and nodded once. Without being told, she went inside and emerged moments later with his revolver, which she handed to him wordlessly. Together they waited as the visitors drew closer. Relief washed over Nathan as he recognized Tom Baker's broad shoulders in the lead. Beside him rode Harper from the general store, and between them, a stranger, a white-haired man in a city suit, looking distinctly uncomfortable on horseback. "Reed," Tom called, raising a hand in greeting. "Brought a visitor?" They dismounted, the stranger moving stiffly after the long ride. Tom made the introductions. "This here's Mr. Daniels from the territorial legislature." The blacksmith's tone was carefully neutral. "Says he needs to speak with you. Both of you." Daniel stepped forward, extending a hand. "Mr. Reed, Miss—" He hesitated, clearly unsure how to address Talise. "Talise will do," she said, not taking his offered hand. The legislator cleared his throat, withdrawing his hand awkwardly. "Yes, well, I've been sent to discuss a matter of some delicacy." He glanced at the revolver still visible in Nathan's belt. "Perhaps we might speak inside." Nathan exchanged a look with Tom, who gave a slight nod, a silent assurance that this visitor, while unwelcome, wasn't an immediate threat. "Come in, then," Nathan said, holstering his weapon. Inside the cabin, Daniels looked around with poorly disguised surprise, taking in the neat interior, the books on the shelf, the small touches that spoke of civilization rather than the savage hovel he'd clearly expected. "Coffee?" Talise offered, her dignity making the politician's discomfort all the more apparent. "Thank you, no," he replied stiffly. "I won't take much of your time." They sat at the table, Talise and Nathan on one side, Daniels across from them, with Tom and Harper standing near to the door like unofficial witnesses. "I'll come straight to the point," Daniels began, placing a leather portfolio on the table. "I'm here about the Harlan matter." Nathan tensed. "What about it?" "The case has complicated implications for the military, for the territorial government, for relations with various Indian tribes." He straightened his collar. "In short, certain parties feel it would be best if the matter were resolved quietly." "It seems quite resolved to me," Nathan said coldly. "Harlan was arrested. Charges were filed." "Yes, well," Daniels coughed, "charges can be adjusted, evidence reconsidered, especially when the witnesses might be persuaded to amend their testimonies." The cabin went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause in its gentle patter on the roof. "Are you asking us to lie?" Talise's voice was soft but dangerous. Daniels flushed. "I'm suggesting that memories of events long past are often imperfect. That perhaps what seemed like intentional wrongdoing might have been simple misunderstanding. Confusion in the heat of battle." "There was no battle at Battle Canyon," Nathan said, fighting to keep his voice level. "There were families, children, elders, and soldiers with orders to exterminate them." Now that's exactly the kind of inflammatory language that serves no one's interests. Daniels opened his portfolio. I've been authorized to offer certain considerations in exchange for a more nuanced view of events. He withdrew a document, sliding it across the table. Nathan didn't touch it. What kind of considerations? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Financial compensation for one, a substantial sum. Daniels nodded at the paper, as well as expanded land rights for your household. Recognition of your service to the territory, a fresh start, shall we say. And what happens to Harlan if we accept? The legislator's expression became carefully blank. The major would be permitted to resign his commission. With honor. The more serious charges would be reconsidered in light of new evidence. He'd go free, Tom said from his position by the door, disgust evident in his voice. He would face appropriate consequences for administrative oversights, Daniels countered, while being acknowledged for his years of service in pacifying the territory. Nathan looked at the document, then at Talise. Her face showed no emotion, but he knew her well enough now to read the anger in the set of her shoulders, the slight flare of her nostrils. Mr. Daniels, Nathan said slowly, do you know what happened at Battle Canyon? The legislator shifted uncomfortably. I've read the reports. Not the reports, the truth. Do you know what Harlan ordered his men to do? Have you seen what a howitzer does to a child's body? Have you heard the screams of mothers watching their babies die? Have you smelled human flesh burning and wickiups set aflame? Daniels paled. Mr. Reed, this kind of graphic. It wasn't graphic, it was real. Nathan leaned forward. Real people died. Real families were destroyed. And you want us to help the man responsible walk free because it's politically inconvenient to admit what happened. You misunderstand. We're offering restitution. Blood money, Talise interjected, her eyes flashing. To buy silence. Daniels turned to her with barely concealed disdain. You should consider your position carefully. These freedom papers you've been granted. They can be revoked as easily as they were issued. A deadly silence fell. Nathan's hand moved toward his revolver. Is that a threat? Tom asked quietly from the doorway. Daniels must have heard the danger in the blacksmith's tone because he backpedaled quickly. Merely an observation about the nature of legal documents. Everything is subject to review. I think it's time for you to leave, Nathan said, standing. Tom, would you see Mr. Daniels back to town? The legislator gathered his portfolio, face tight with anger and embarrassment. You're making a serious mistake. There are powerful interests invested in this matter. They won't take kindly to being thwarted. We've faced worse than politicians and railroad men, Nathan replied evenly. As Tom and Harper escorted the fuming Daniels outside, Talise remained at the table, staring at the document he'd left behind, the written offer of blood money for their silence. He's right about one thing, she said when Nathan returned from seeing them off. They can take back the freedom papers. Nathan knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. They can trip by. And if they do, then we'll fight or we'll leave, go somewhere they can't reach us. He squeezed her hands. But we won't lie about Battle Canyon. Not for any price. She touched his face, eyes searching his. You would leave? Your home? Your land? Talise. He pressed his forehead to hers. You are my home. The rest is just dirt and wood. That evening, they burned Daniel's offer in the fireplace, watching the promises of wealth and security curl into ash. As the flames consumed the document, Nathan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Some compromises cost more than any reward could justify. Later, as they lay in bed listening to the night sounds of the desert, Talise spoke into the darkness. I want to visit the canyon, she said softly. Battle Canyon, where it happened. Nathan tensed beside her. Why? To say goodbye to those we lost. Her hand found his beneath the blankets, to let them rest. He was silent for so long that she thought he might refuse. Finally, he turned to her, face solemn in the dim moonlight, filtering through the window. When? When the moon is full again. 10 days. He nodded, bringing her hand to his lips. Then we'll go. Together. The days leading up to their journey passed in a haze of preparation and anticipation. Nathan repaired the wagon, checked and rechecked their supplies. Talise gathered herbs, prepared medicines, and created small bundles of sage, tobacco, and sweetgrass, for the ritual she planned. Word of their intended pilgrimage spread through Clearwater. To Nathan's surprise, several townspeople approached with offerings. Peterson brought a new blanket for the journey. The widow Johnson, dried fruit and meat. Harper, ammunition for Nathan's revolver, just in case. Even the station master, once hostile, provided a detailed map marking the safest routes. Folks remember what Harlan did to you, Tom explained, when Nathan expressed bewilderment at the unexpected support. Maybe they didn't speak up then, but they remember. The night before their departure, Tom and his family joined them for supper. As the women cleared away the dishes, Tom drew Nathan outside to the porch, voice low. Got word from the Capitol, he said, glancing over his shoulder to ensure they weren't overheard. Harlan's trial has been postponed, indefinitely. Nathan's jaw tightened. Daniel's work? Likely, but that's not all. Tom's weathered face was grave. Harlan's been released pending investigation. No one seems to know where he's gone. A cold prickle ran down Nathan's spine. You think he'll come here? Man like that, humiliated, stripped of power, his reputation in tatters? Tom shook his head. He'll look for someone to blame, and you two are at the top of that list. We can handle Harlan. Maybe so, but watch your backs, especially out there, away from town. The blacksmith squeezed Nathan's shoulder. You've got friends here now, Reed. Don't forget that. That night, as they made final preparations, Nathan debated whether to tell Talise about Harlan's release. She'd noticed his increased vigilance, the extra ammunition, the rifle he'd cleaned and loaded for the journey. Something troubles you, she said, reading his silence as she always did. He told her what Tom had shared. To his surprise, she showed no fear, only a grim acknowledgement. He will come, she said with certainty. His kind always return, like coyotes to carrion. Maybe we should postpone the journey. Wait until— No. Her voice was firm. We go tomorrow, as planned. I will not live in fear of this man any longer. She touched the knife she'd taken to carrying at her belt, a gift from Nathan, who had taught her to use it with precision. And if he finds us, we will be ready. They set out at dawn, the wagon loaded with supplies for the 3-day journey. Battle Canyon lay in the foothills of the Chiricahua Mountains, a remote area seldom visited since the massacre had rendered it a place of dark memories and restless spirits. The first day's travel was uneventful, the wagon creaking over rutted trails as they left the relative civilization of Clearwater behind. They made camp that night beside a small, spring-fed pool, one of the few reliable water sources in the region. As Talise prepared their evening meal over the campfire, Nathan secured the perimeter, old military habits resurfacing in the wilderness. He returned to find her watching him with a mixture of amusement and understanding. You expect trouble, she observed, stirring the pot of beans and bacon. Just being cautious, he replied, settling beside her. Harlan aside, there are still renegade bands in these hills. Deserters, outlaws. She handed him a tin cup of coffee. An Apache? Some, he admitted. Those who refuse the reservation, who still fight. My mother's cousin was such a one. Talisa's gaze turned distant. Nateni, she was called, the fighter. She escaped during the long walk to San Carlos. Many said she died in the mountains. Others said she joined the resistance. Do you think she's still alive? Talise shrugged. Perhaps. The strong survive. A small smile. As we have. After eating, they sat by the fire, the night pressing close around their small circle of light. Stars scattered across the vast desert sky like grains of salt on black velvet. In the distance, coyotes began their nightly chorus, yips and howls that seemed to carry messages across the empty miles. They're speaking to each other, Talise said, listening intently, warning of strangers in their territory. Us? Perhaps, or others. Her expression grew serious. My grandmother taught me that coyotes carry messages between worlds, that they know what humans cannot see. Nathan added wood to the fire, sparks rising like fleeting spirits. What do they say tonight, mate? She closed her eyes, head tilted as if the sounds contained words only she could decipher. They say, be watchful. Changes come with the dawn. He smiled, reaching for her hand. That's rather vague advice. The spirits are seldom specific, she replied, returning a smile. It would make life too simple. They slept close that night, beneath a canopy of stars, the desert's cool breath washing over them as they drifted into dreams. Nathan woke once, startled by a sound, hand reaching for his revolver. But it was only a nightbird, calling to its mate across the darkness. He watched Talise sleeping beside him, her face peaceful in repose, and felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it left him breathless. Whatever came, Harland, hostile Apache, the territorial government and its threats, he would defend what they had built together. This fragile, precious peace, this unexpected love. Dawn brought the changes the coyotes had promised, clouds gathering on the eastern horizon, unusual for the season. As they continued their journey, the sky darkened, and by midday, fat raindrops began to fall, slowly at first, then in a steady, drenching downpour. They pushed on, Talise pulling her shawl over her head, Nathan's hat providing little protection against the unexpected deluge. The wagon wheels sank into mud, forcing them to stop more frequently as the horses struggled with the increasingly difficult terrain. "We should find shelter," Nathan called over the drumming rain. "Wait it out." Talise pointed to a ridge ahead. "There, my people use those caves during hunts." He guided the team toward the limestone outcropping she had indicated. As they drew closer, he saw the dark openings in the pale rock, natural shelters that had served generations of travelers in this harsh land. They had just reached the largest cave when lightning split the sky, followed by a crack of thunder that made the horses rear in panic. Nathan fought to control the frightened animals, finally managing to unhitch them and secure them inside a smaller adjacent cave. By the time he joined Talise in the main cavern, they were both soaked to the skin, shivering as the rain-cooled air penetrated their wet clothing. The cave was larger than it had appeared from outside, a high-ceilinged chamber extending deep into the hillside with ancient soot marks staining the rock above where countless fires had burned. "We'll wait here until it passes," Nathan said, surveying their temporary refuge. "Might be a while." Talise was already gathering what dry brush she could find near the cave entrance. "We need fire, warmth." Working together, they soon had a small blaze going, its light dancing on the limestone walls, creating a pocket of warmth in the damp chill. They spread their wet outer garments on rocks near the fire to dry and huddled close, sharing body heat. "I've never seen rain like this," Nathan said, watching the water cascade past the cave entrance like a silver curtain. "Not in this season." Talisa's eyes reflected the firelight. "It is a blessing, a cleansing before we reach the canyon." He considered this. "You believe the Spirit sent the rain for us?" "I believe all things are connected. The rain, our journey, the memories we carry." She leaned against him. "Even Harlan's freedom, perhaps." Nathan stiffened. "How is that a blessing?" "A snake hidden in grass is more dangerous than one you can see clearly." Her voice was soft but certain. "Now we know to watch for him, to be ready." They fell silent, listening to the rain's rhythmic patter and the occasional rumble of distant thunder. The cave grew warmer as their fire strengthened, casting long shadows into the recesses beyond their small circle of light. After a while, Talise rose and moved deeper into the cavern, her silhouette merging with the darkness. Nathan watched, curious but respectful of her need for solitude. When she returned, her expression was thoughtful. "There are drawings," she said, "far back, ancient ones. Cave paintings?" She nodded. "My ancestors. Stories of the before time." She held out her hand. "I'll show you." Taking a burning branch for light, she led him deeper into the cave, past the area marked by modern usage, into a narrower passage that opened suddenly into a second chamber. Here, the ceiling lowered, and on its surface, barely visible in the flickering torchlight, were images drawn in red ochre and black charcoal. Stick figures hunting deer, spiral symbols, handprints pressed against the stone centuries ago. "The old ones spoke through these drawings," Talise explained, raising the torch higher, "so their children's children would remember the sacred stories." Nathan touched one of the faded handprints reverently, feeling a connection across time to the person who had placed their palm against this same stone, leaving behind this ghostly signature. "What do the stories say?" he asked. "They tell of great journeys, of times of hunger and times of plenty, of enemies and alliances." She moved the torch to illuminate a complex scene depicting human figures surrounded by what appeared to be flames or rays of light, and of transformation, how suffering can change a person into something new, something stronger. Nathan studied the primitive yet powerful images, struck by their enduring relevance. Not so different from our stories today. The important stories never change, she agreed. Only the tellers. They spent the afternoon exploring the cave system, discovering chambers adorned with more pictographs, some so ancient they had nearly faded into the stone itself. As they ventured deeper, Talise shared the legends associated with each image, stories of creation and destruction, of hero twins and monster slayers, of the delicate balance between the human world and the spirit realm. When they finally returned to their fire, the rain had stopped, though water still dripped from the cave entrance. The sudden storm had passed, leaving behind a washed-clean world scented with wet sage and limestone dust. "We'll stay here tonight," Nathan decided, noticing that daylight was already fading. "Continue at first light." They made a simple camp, more comfortable than they had expected given the circumstances. The cave provided excellent shelter, and their supplies, protected in the wagon, had remained mostly dry. As night fell, they ate dried meat and the cornbread Talise had prepared before their departure, sitting close to their fire as darkness enveloped the world outside. "Tomorrow we'll reach the canyon," Talise said, staring into the flames. "By midday, if the trails aren't too muddy." Nathan nodded, trying to prepare himself for what lay ahead. He had never returned to Battle Canyon after that day, had actively avoided it during his years in the territory. The prospect of confronting those memories, of standing where so many had died because of orders he had refused, filled him with a dread he could barely articulate. Sensing his unease, Talise took his hand. "You don't have to come with me to the exact place. You can wait at the rim." "No," he said firmly. "We do this together, all the way." She studied his face in the firelight. "It will be difficult, for both of us." "Some things should be difficult," he replied. "Some memories shouldn't come easy." They slept fitfully that night, both haunted by anticipation of what tomorrow would bring. Nathan dreamed of gunfire and screams, of Harlan's face contorted with rage, of Miller raising his pistol with cold determination. He woke gasping, sweat-soaked despite the cave's coolness. Beside him, Talise stirred. "Bad dreams?" "Old ones," he murmured. "Sorry I woke you." She sat up, brushing hair from her face. "I wasn't sleeping well either." In the dying firelight, her expression was solemn. "I keep seeing their faces, my cousins, the elders, all those who didn't escape." Nathan pulled her close, and they sat together in the darkness, two survivors bound by shared trauma, finding solace in each other's presence when words failed. Dawn brought clear skies and renewed purpose. They set out early, the world around them transformed by yesterday's rain. Wildflowers had appeared overnight in rocky crevices, and the usually dusty trail was temporarily tamed, making for easier travel. As Talise had predicted, they reached Battle Canyon by midday. Nathan recognized the approach even after 5 years. The distinctive rock formation locals called Eagle's Wing, the gentle slope leading down to what had once been a seasonal stream, the natural bowl formed by the surrounding hills that had made the canyon both an ideal settlement and a perfect trap. He reined in the horses at the rim, breath catching in his throat. Below, the remains of the Apache village were still visible, charred posts marking wickiup locations, stone circles that had once been cooking pits. The scattered debris of lives interrupted violently. Nature had begun to reclaim the site. Desert grasses pushed through the ash-stained soil, and young mesquite trees had taken root where blood had soaked the ground. But to those who knew what to look for, the scars of massacre remained evident in the landscape itself. Talise stood in the wagon, eyes sweeping the canyon with an expression Nathan couldn't read. Was it grief, anger, or something beyond both? A recognition, perhaps, of the sacred nature of this place where so many souls had departed suddenly, violently. "We'll leave the wagon here," she said finally, her voice steady. "Walk down." They secured the horses and gathered what they needed: Talise's ceremonial bundles, water, Nathan's revolver, still a necessity in these remote parts, regardless of their purpose. The descent into the canyon was steep in places, requiring careful navigation of loose stones and thorny brush. As they neared the canyon floor, Nathan felt a heaviness in the air that had nothing to do with the previous day's rain. The silence was profound. No birds sang, no insects buzzed. Even the breeze, which whispered through the grass on the rim, seemed to die here. You feel it too, Talise observed, noting his expression. The weight. He nodded, unable to articulate the oppressive sense of presence, or rather of absence so complete it became a presence in itself. This was a place of ghosts, of interrupted stories, of endings without resolution. They walked among the ruins, Talise occasionally stopping to touch a stone or kneel beside the remnants of a structure. She moved with purpose, as if following a map visible only to her, while Nathan hung back, allowing her this time to reconnect with what had been lost. Finally, she stopped at what appeared to be the center of the former settlement, a circular clearing where the ground was still stained dark despite the years of sun and rain. Here, she said simply, this was our gathering place, where we danced, prayed, told stories. She knelt, fingers brushing the earth, where many died that day. Nathan remained standing, hat in hand, throat tight with emotion. From this vantage point, he could see exactly how the attack had unfolded, where the soldiers had positioned themselves on the surrounding slopes, where the howitzer had been placed for maximum effect, where desperate families had tried to flee only to be cut down by rifle fire. I was there, he said hoarsely, pointing to a ridge to the east, with my unit, when Harlan gave the order to fire. The memories rushed back with visceral clarity, the stunned faces of his men, the bitter taste of fear as he made his choice, the impact of Miller's bullet driving him backward into the dust. I thought I was dying. Maybe I should have. No, Talisa's voice was firm. You were spared for a reason, to bear witness, to remember, to help heal. She rose facing him, as was I. She began unpacking her ceremonial items, the sage and sweetgrass bundles, a small clay pot containing what appeared to be corn pollen, a drinking gourd filled with water from Whisper Creek. With movements both practiced and improvised, she created a small altar on the stained ground, arranging the items in a pattern meaningful to her tradition. What can I do? Nathan asked, feeling both out of place and intrinsically connected to what was happening. Sit, she instructed, indicating a spot across from her. Remember, speak their names if you know them. Be present with the truth of what happened here. He sat, watching as she lit the sage bundle with a striker, using a feather to waft the fragrant smoke over the altar, then over herself and finally toward him. The familiar scent, now a part of their daily life at the cabin, took on new significance in this context, a bridge between worlds, between then and now. We come to honor those who were taken, Talise began, her voice taking on a rhythmic quality unlike her everyday speech. To remember their lives, not only their deaths, to release their spirits if they still wander this place of violence, to acknowledge the wrong that was done. She spoke first in Apache, fluid musical phrases that Nathan could not understand, but whose emotional resonance transcended language. Then she switched to English, perhaps for his benefit, perhaps because some things needed to be spoken in the tongue of those who had committed the crime. We bring water from a place of new life, she continued, pouring a small amount from the gourd onto the earth. We bring sacred plants that cleanse and heal. She added pinches of various herbs to the smoldering sage. We bring our hearts, open to both sorrow and hope. Nathan watched, mesmerized, as she conducted the ceremony of her own devising, part traditional, part personal, wholly authentic. When she indicated that he should speak, he found himself sharing memories he hadn't known he still carried, the names of Apache he had encountered during his service, fragments of conversations before relations deteriorated, observations about the community that had once thrived in this now desolate place. Time seemed to suspend as they sat together in that circle of remembrance. The sun moved across the sky, shadows shifted, but they remained bearing witness, offering what healing they could to a wound in the landscape and in history. It was late afternoon when Talise finally rose, her ritual complete. Nathan stood too, feeling strangely lightened, as if some burden he'd carried for years had been partially lifted through this act of acknowledgement. Thank you, she said simply, touching his arm, for coming back here, for facing this. He covered her hand with his. Thank you for showing me how. They were gathering their things to begin the climb back to the wagon when Nathan froze, every sense suddenly alert. A sound had caught his attention, subtle, easily dismissed, but unmistakable to someone with military training. A horse's soft nickering, quickly hushed. Not their horses, secured at the rim. Someone else's. "Talise," he said quietly, not looking at her but scanning the surrounding slopes. "When I give the word, move quickly to those rocks." He nodded toward a cluster of boulders that would provide cover. She followed his gaze, immediately understanding. Without question, she began casually gathering her ceremonial items, masking her awareness of danger with deliberate movements. Nathan kept his voice low. "Someone's watching us. Has been for some time, I'd guess." "Harland?" she whispered. "Maybe. Or reservation police. Or hostile Apache." He eased his revolver from its holster. "Either way, we're exposed here." The attack came without warning, a rifle shot cracking through the canyon's silence, the bullet striking inches from where Talise stood. Before the echo died, Nathan was moving, pulling her toward the boulders as a second shot kicked up dust at their heels. They reached cover as a third bullet ricocheted off stone, sending fragments flying. Pressed against the rocks, Nathan tried to locate the shooter, but the canyon's acoustics made it impossible to pinpoint the source of the gunfire. "Are you hit?" he asked urgently, checking Talise for injuries. She shook her head, remarkably calm despite the danger. "No, but we're trapped." She was right. The boulders provided temporary protection, but they were effectively pinned down. The climb back to the wagon was exposed all the way. They'd be easy targets on that slope, and darkness was still hours away. Another shot struck at her shelter, closer this time, suggesting the attacker was moving to get a better angle. "We need to know who we're dealing with," Nathan muttered, cautiously peering around the edge of their cover. A voice answered that question. Familiar, cultured, with the practiced command of a career officer. "Reed, I know you're there. You and your Apache whore." Harland, Nathan's blood ran cold. The former major had found them, just as Tom had warned he might. "Show yourself, you coward," Harland called, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Face me like a man for once in your miserable life." Nathan signaled Talise to stay down, then raised his voice in response. "It's over, Harland. The truth about Battle Canyon is out. Killing us won't change that." A harsh laugh. "You think so? You think anyone will remember or care once you're gone? History belongs to the victors, Reed. Always has." Another shot, closer still. Harland was definitely moving, circling to outflank them. "We need to split up," Nathan whispered to Talise. "Give me your knife." She handed it over without hesitation. "What are you planning?" "I'll draw his fire. When he focuses on me, you run for those trees." He pointed to a cluster of mesquite about 50 yards to their right. "Make for the eastern trail. It's steeper but leads back to the rim." "And leave you?" "No." "Talise." He gripped her shoulders. "One of us needs to get out of here. Get help." She started to protest again, but another shot from a different angle silenced her. Harlan was executing a standard military flanking maneuver. He'd have them fully exposed within minutes. "Trust me," Nathan said, pressing his forehead to hers briefly. "I'll keep him busy." Before she could object further, he moved to the opposite edge of their shelter and called out, "You want me, Harland? Come and get me." Oh, and then he broke cover, firing twice in the direction of the last shot before diving behind a smaller rock formation 20 yards away. The distraction worked. Harlan's attention and gunfire followed Nathan, momentarily ignoring Talise. She seized the opportunity, sprinting low and fast toward the mesquite trees. Nathan saw her reach cover safely just as a bullet struck the ground beside him, showering him with dirt and stone fragments. "Is this what they taught you at the point, Harland?" Nathan shouted, trying to keep the former officer's attention. "Ambushing unarmed women? Shooting from hiding? Don't lecture me about honor." Harlan's voice was closer now, somewhere on the slope above. "Not after what you did. The men you betrayed. The mission you compromised." "The mission?" Nathan's laugh was bitter. Slaughtering families was a mission now? They were hostiles, every one of them. They were people. Nathan fired toward the voice, knowing he was unlikely to hit anything, but hoping to keep Harlan pinned down long enough for Talise to reach the rim. "People your government had promised to protect." A movement caught his eye, Harlan, breaking cover momentarily as he shifted position. Nathan fired and was rewarded with a cry of pain. Not a fatal hit, judging by the curse that followed, but he'd wounded the man. "You'll pay for that," Harlan snarled, his voice tight with pain. just like you'll pay for everything else. Nathan checked his ammunition, 3 bullets left, not enough for a protracted firefight. He needed to end this, one way or another, before Harlan realized Talise was gone and went after her. It's just you and me now, Royce, he called, using the man's first name deliberately. The way it should be, let's finish what started at Battle Canyon. With pleasure. The voice was much closer than Nathan expected, just above and behind him. He spun, raising his revolver, but too late. Harlan stood on the rock above him, rifle aimed directly at his chest. Blood stained the former major's left sleeve, but his grip on the weapon was steady. 5 years I've waited for this, Harlan said, his face a mask of hatred and triumph. 5 years planning how I'd find you, how I'd make you pay for destroying everything I built. Nathan kept his revolver pointed upward, though they both knew Harlan had the advantage. You built nothing but graves, Royce, for Apache families, for your own men who trusted you, for your career. My career? Harlan's laugh was wild, unhinged. I was going to be a general. I had commendations, connections, a future in Washington. And you, one weak-stomached sergeant with misplaced sympathies, took it all away. You took it away yourself when you ordered that massacre. It was war. Harlan's voice rose to a shout. They understood that, the men in power, until your damn testimony surfaced. Your evidence. His finger tightened on the trigger. But it ends here with you, and then your woman. Nathan tensed, preparing for the bullet he knew was coming. But a voice from behind Harlan froze them both. It ends now, Talise said calmly, but not as you planned. Harlan started to turn, but stopped when he felt the cold press of metal against his neck. Talise's knife, retrieved from where Nathan had hidden it earlier, now in her steady hand. Drop the rifle, she ordered, or die where you stand. Confusion and rage warred on Harlan's face. You were supposed to run, he spat, to leave him. I circled back, she replied simply, as my ancestors taught me. Never abandon your family. For a heartbeat the tableau held, Harlan with his rifle still aimed at Nathan, Talise with her knife at Harlan's throat, Nathan with his revolver trained upward, finger on the trigger. Then something shifted in Harlan's expression. A terrible resolve, a willingness to die if it meant taking Nathan with him. His finger began to squeeze the trigger. 2 shots rang out simultaneously, Nathan's revolver and another weapon, firing from the rim of the canyon. Harlan jerked backward, his rifle discharging harmlessly into the air, and then he was falling, tumbling past Nathan to land in a broken heap on the canyon floor. Nathan scrambled to his feet, reaching for Talise, who stood stunned on the rock above, knife still in hand. Together they looked up toward the source of the second shot. Tom Baker stood at the canyon rim, rifle still raised, with Michael and several other men from Clearwater beside him. The blacksmith lowered his weapon slowly, face grim. Figured you might need some help, he called down. Daniels came back to town yesterday asking too many questions about your whereabouts. Nathan held Talise close, both of them shaking with the aftermath of danger and deliverance. Your timing is impeccable, he called back, voice unsteady with relief. It was over. Truly over this time. Later, as they made camp with the Clearwater men a safe distance from Battle Canyon, Nathan and Talise sat apart from the others, watching stars appear in the deepening twilight. The events of the day, the ceremony of remembrance, Harlan's attack, the final confrontation, had left them drained yet somehow cleansed, as if a festering wound had finally been lanced. What happens now? Nathan asked softly, echoing the question they had asked each other so many times in their journey together. Talise leaned against him, her strength a constant that never ceased to amaze him. We go home, she said simply. We live, we remember, we build something new. Home. The word still carried its magic, its promise of belonging after so many years of displacement for them both. Together, he agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. 3 days later, they returned to Whisper Creek, the homestead a welcome sight after their harrowing journey. The garden had thrived in their absence, and the goats greeted them with impatient bleating, eager for attention after being tended by a neighbor during their absence. As they unpacked the wagon, Nathan noticed Talise pause, looking out over their land with an expression of quiet wonder. What is it? He asked, coming to stand beside her. I was thinking about what we've built here, she replied. From nothing, from loss. She turned to him, eyes bright with emotion and purpose. I want to build more. More land? A bigger cabin? She shook her head, taking his hand and placing it gently over her abdomen. A family. Nathan's breath caught as understanding dawned. Are you? Yes. Her smile was radiant, transforming her usually solemn face. New life, Nathan. Here, where we found each other. Joy surged through him, so intense it was almost painful. A child. Their child. A future neither of them had dared imagine when fate and Harlan's cruelty first brought them together. That evening, as the sun set over Whisper Creek, they sat on the porch steps, making plans for the future they could now claim without reservation. They would need a cradle, a larger garden, perhaps another room added to the cabin. The widow Johnson would know about birthing. Harper might have children's books in his store. We should mark this, Nathan said suddenly, an idea forming. The way your people do. The way we did at the canyon. He fetched his tools, a hammer, a chisel, a small saw, and led Talise to the old oak tree that stood beside the now flowing creek. Its trunk was broad and sturdy, its roots deep in the desert soil. What would you write? She asked, watching as he began to carve. Nathan worked carefully, each stroke of the chisel deliberate, each letter formed with the precision of a man, inscribing something meant to endure before him. When he finished, he stepped back so she could see. Home built by two hearts. Talise touched the freshly carved words, fingers tracing each letter. It's not poetry, she said, echoing what he had once told her. No, Nathan agreed, drawing her close. It's truth. Above them, the oak's leaves rustled in the evening breeze, scattering a few golden rays of the setting sun like blessings upon their heads. Whisper Creek murmured its gentle song, a promise of life continuing, renewing, healing. I used to think home was gone, Talise whispered, one hand on the carved words, the other still resting on her abdomen where new life grew. That nothing would ever grow again, where they burned my village. She looked at the fields where corn bent under the wind, at the cabin they had rebuilt together, at the man who had once been her enemy and was now her heart's companion. But maybe home isn't something you find, she continued. Maybe it's something you build with another soul. Nathan's voice came low, rough with emotion. I thought I was done building anything, but you proved me wrong. As darkness settled over Whisper Creek, they remained by the oak, beneath words carved into living wood, a testament to what can grow from ashes, what can heal from wounds, what can be built when two hearts find each other in the vast wilderness of the world. Home. 6 months later, as winter softened into spring, the oak tree's first new leaves unfurled above the carved inscription. The creek ran stronger now, nourished by unexpected rains. Inside the cabin, expanded by a new room built with help from Tom and the men of Clearwater, Talise rocked a cradle fashioned from cedar wood. The child sleeping there had Nathan's cleft chin and Talise's dark, observant eyes. They had named her Dawn, a word that meant the same in both their languages, the beginning of light after darkness. From the porch where he sat mending a bridle, Nathan watched a caravan approaching from the south. Apache families who had heard rumors of a place where one of their own lived freely with her husband, with papers that granted protection. They came seeking shelter, advice, perhaps permission to settle nearby. More visitors, he called to Talise. She appeared in the doorway, their daughter cradled against her shoulder. Not visitors, she corrected with quiet certainty. New beginnings. As they walked together to greet the travelers, Nathan realized that what had started as one man's exile and one woman's captivity had grown into something neither could have imagined. Not just a home, but a sanctuary. Not just peace, but purpose. The desert wind still blew, sometimes harsh and unforgiving. But now it carried seeds instead of just dust, promises instead of just memories. And in this unlikely place between these unlikely hearts, something new and necessary was taking root. Something that might, with time and tending, heal more than just two souls.